hold space for your darkness, a first responder mental health podcast hosted by me, Erin Jane, where we have conversations about what it's like to perform a first responder role and the mental health challenges that can accompany it. Thank you, Fallout Boy, there with my songs Know What You Did in the Dark. G'day, guys. You are here holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station, one of our standard Thursday afternoon dates. So what are we going to have a conversation about today? Today, the topic of the show is which wolf are you feeding? Right. And I guess just a little word to the wise too. If you guys aren't already following me on the socials, I normally try to post either the morning of or even perhaps sometimes like the night before if I'm super organized, which I typically aren't. But if you jump on the socials under Erin Jane Coaching, I normally give you guys a bit of an idea about what I'm going to talk about on my show. So if ever you want to go, I wonder what Ezzy's talking about today, you can always jump on and I always tag the Thin Line Rock Station in my posts too. So if you're ever interested or equally have any ideas that, topics of conversation or anything like that you would like me to discuss, you guys are always welcome to either reach out on the socials to me directly under Erin Jane Coaching or to the Thin Line Rock Station themselves. So like I said, the topic of the show is which wolf are you feeding? And it may be like a concept that you're aware of, right? Because it's kind of, bounces around like the mental health and wellness space a fair amount. And I think Boulder Crest Foundation use it as part of their post-traumatic growth philosophy and all that kind of thing. But essentially it stems from the tale of two wolves. And that goes back, it's a proverb that's supposed to be like an old American Indian Cherokee proverb, right? But essentially it breaks down to there's a war that goes on inside of ourselves. And it's the war between, leaning into, say, optimism or pessimism, leaning into positivity or cynicism, leading into our perspective and mindset on life, whether we want that to be, more of a positive one or whether we sort of want to take that cynicism lens and apply it to everything. And that's what we sort of want to have a chat about today, because I'll go into the proverb in a little bit more depth, but essentially what it boils down to is, if there's a battle between these two, ends of the spectrum inside all of us, which one wins? And it's the one that we feed. The one that we feed and that we fuel either with positivity or negativity is the one that wins in the end. And so that's what we're going to have a conversation about today. All right, let's play some Fontella Bass with Rescue Me. I definitely love that song. Thank you, Benson Boone, there with Beautiful Things. And you are back holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And we are having a conversation today about which wolf are you feeding? And I want to preface it by saying this is not my concept. I did not come up with this. All credit to wherever it came from. And believe it or not, I am a giant nerd and I do typically like a little bit of research before I jump on and have conversations with you guys about things, because typically I want to give you accurate information or resources and all that kind of thing. And when something sparks my interest to the point where I want to come on and share it with you guys, I put in the time and the effort to make sure that, I can speak about it in, with some kind of clarity. We think about, there's always like a lot of references about like a wolf in sheep's clothing. And I think they're more sort of like Bible references. And there's I think a similar ideation of this wolf analogy, using dogs and other sort of things. But when it boils down to it, like, the one that sort of, I guess, spoke to me a little bit more is the tale of two wolves. And so it talks about there's an evening, it's an old American Indian Cherokee told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside of people, so like an existential battle, if you want to call it that. And whether you're talking about, like the good angel and bad angel that sits on our shoulders, it's that kind of imagery. And the old Cherokee says to his grandson, "My son, the battle is between two wolves inside of us all. One is evil. It is anger, envy, jealousy, doubt, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego." So that's quite a list if we're honest, right? And then he says the other is good. It is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, forgiveness, truth, compassion, and faith. So you can definitely see the dichotomy of which wolf is, essentially promoting which part of ourselves, right? And then the grandson thinks for a bit and then says to his grandfather, "Which wolf wins?" And the grandfather responds, "The one that you feed." So I'm going to leave you with that to have a little bit of a ponder, and then we're going to chat about it a little more. Okay, let's play some Goo Goo Dolls with Iris, one of Doug White's favorites. Thank you, Evanescence, there with Call Me When You're Sober, and you're back with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And we're talking about the wolf, or the wolves plural, that, it can exist inside of us. And we're talking about, which one we feed sort of determines how we live our lives realistically, And I think, I've heard of this before. I've heard of it a while ago. And then I think I saw, some reel on Instagram about it, and it kind of popped it back into my minds. And you guys know my mind goes, spinning about the kinds of things that I want to jump on here and talk to you guys about each week. But I think it's important to not only recognize, but acknowledge the fact that whether you are looking at it from the perspective of good and evil, positive, negative, cynicism versus optimism, right? Like whatever side that you really kind of want to lean into, or the division of them. We all have all of these parts of ourselves inside of us, because that dichotomy wouldn't exist if we didn't. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like we're not these one-dimensional creatures as human beings, are we? We are capable of sometimes holding, two things to be true for us at the same time. And perhaps that is why, it is such an internal battle of which wolf are we feeding, because so much shit can go on for us, and I'm not just talking like our private lives. I'm also talking our professional lives as first responders. We can be tempted to cut corners in our roles. We can be tempted to, perhaps tell a lie, be unfaithful to our partners. Like there are so many things that perhaps tempt us, and there are so many things that drive it. Like, we were saying, you can be driven by ego, by greed, by jealousy, by all of the different things. And on the other side of the coin, we can be driven by empathy and compassion and joy and the desire for peace. So I think what makes it truly interesting is the fact that we're capable of experiencing and exemplifying all of those different kinds of traits and parts of our personality. So that perhaps is where the challenge lies, because we're capable of all of them. It has to be a choice for us to choose one or the other, realistically. All right, let's play a little bit of Peggy Lee with Fever. Thank you, Danzig, there with Mother. And you were back holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And so what does this proverb or analogy, what is it sort of showing us? What's it teaching us? It's like, from my perspective, and feel free to have like a differing one, but when I look at it, right, it says to me that there's kind of one simple truth, and that whichever wolf that we feed, it's a choice. It's a choice that we make. But it's not just, and I think this is where the difficulty lies, because, right, if we could just make one choice and go, yep, I'm going to be an optimist, I'm going to look at the positive side of life, and then everything's going to be awesome, right? If it was that simple, well, then everyone would do it, wouldn't they? But so choosing to feed the quote unquote the good wolf, or the optimistic one, whichever way you want to call it, right? It's a choice that we make, but it's not just this one simple choice one day and then life is good. It's purposeful and intentional choices that we are forced to make every single day. Each day, every day, we are being intentional about making choices to feed the wolf that we want to feed. And that can be where some of the difficulty lies, because it's not always easy. If it is the aim that, that we may have to feed the quote unquote good wolf, that's not always going to be an easy choice. I look at it like, everyone talks about, it's always better to take the high road, right? The low road is fun sometimes. And sometimes we all want to take the low road. Sometimes people don't deserve us to take the high road. But we know that for the betterment of ourselves and to perhaps be a better person, it can be the right thing to do to feed the good wolf and take the high road, and not, sink down to like other people's level of bullshit, But it's an active choice. It is an intentional, purposeful, active choice that we may have to make each and every day and multiple times. And that can also sound exhausting. And I hear you with that. So that's why we're like, flushing it out. We're having a conversation about it today, because I am a big believer in personal agency. And I've talked about it on the show before. And that means making choices for the kind of life that we want and the kind of mindset and perspective that we want to choose to have good in our life. Let's play some Pat Benatar. That was the Marshall Tucker Band with Can't You See? And you were back holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And I also wanted to share with you guys too, slightly off topic, but for anyone who has, tuned in, perhaps even just in like the last couple of months, I actually also host a podcast called I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. It's a first responder mental health podcast. And as having been a former police officer and detective in Australia, and the current wife of an active duty firefighter here in Massachusetts, I feel like it gives me a really amazing opportunity to have, really deep, insightful conversations with people about, their first responder experiences and careers, and some of the challenges that they've faced, and perhaps what helped, perhaps what hindered, all of the things. And so they're the conversations that I have. And there's about, if you want to go find it, wherever you find your podcasts, there's probably about, I think 50 episodes we're up to. But I will wholeheartedly admit I have been a little slack the last couple of months, and I don't think I've released an episode since like the end of August, because life gets in the way, life gets busy, and I had to sort of focus on my counseling and psychology studies a little bit more, and look after my boys and all that kind of fun stuff. So it wasn't I had to be intentional, like we were just talking about it, and take a bit of a step back. But this next week coming up, actually, I am recording an episode with a lovely Australian bloke on our Friday afternoon and their Saturday morning. I'm speaking with someone else next Tuesday, and I'm actually being a guest on a podcast next Wednesday. So it's all happening, but I'm just really thrilled because number one, getting to put out, you know, these conversations that I'm privileged to have, but equally it's something I derive, like, I guess, like before I joined the Thin Line Rock Station, you know, 12 months ago, that was kind of the thing that brought real joy to my life was, you know, in a work sense, was being privileged enough to have these conversations and put them out for those who wanted to hear it, needed to hear it, all of the things. To be getting back into that now that my semester is finished and I have that little bit of extra wiggle room, I'm really, really thrilled to be, you know, getting to have these conversations and share them with you guys. So hopefully next week I will be able to drop another episode and we'll be able to tell you guys all about it. All right, let's kick on with some rock and roll. A little bit of Van Halen to kick off our second hour here together, holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And guys, we are having a discussion about which wolf are we feeding? You know, and if you're just joining us, it comes from an old American, Native American, Indian, Cherokee proverb, analogy, whatever you want to call it, and essentially that within all of us there is a battle going on between two wolves, and one of them, you know, is essentially represents all of our like positive traits that we can have. You know, whether it's compassion, love, kindness, all of the things that I guess in an idealized world, we all want to lean into, or most of us want to lean into, I guess I'll preface it with that. Whereas the other wolf is, you know, all of the negative, pessimistic, cynical sort of traits that, you know, whether it's hatred, greed, anger, jealousy, all of like the negative minded things, right? And I think things that kind of spread like poison, I feel like is a good way to sort of phrase it. And it's, you know, whichever the one that we feed, which means, you know, what we attend to, what we nurture, what we really focus on, I guess. Is the one that grows stronger and the one that wins the battle. So that's where the question comes from, like which wolf are you feeding? And like we talked about in the last hour, choosing to feed one over the other is a choice. And it's an active and purposeful choice, but it's not just a one-off decision to make, right? It is purposeful and intentional, especially if we are choosing to feed the quote unquote good, positive, optimistic one. And I think as well that can be hard as first responders, right? Because we see a lot of what the world has to offer, and a lot of it can be bad, it can be negative. We can see the beautiful friendships and camaraderie and kindness that, you know, we offer each other, and we, you know, offer our time to, you know, the general public, and we, you know, we're, as the saying goes, we're the ones, you know, running in the direction of the danger when everyone else is running away. So we do see those elements, but we also see tragedy. We see, you know, what people are capable of, how they're capable of hurting other people, and truly, you know, perhaps what happens when we feed the worst wolf inside of ourselves imaginable. You know, so that's what we're going to keep cracking on having a conversation with. Let's play the warning and sick. Who doesn't love a little bit of poison there with Unskinny Bop? And we are continuing on our Thursday afternoon standard date here on the Thin Line Rock Station. And you are listening to Erin Jane. And we are holding space for the wolf that we're feeding today. And so equally too, like, and I you know, mentioned it in the last hour, I'm a big proponent for personal agency. I think we make choices in our lives. And like I said, you know, it's whether we take the high road or the low road, you know, these are choices that we make. And from my perspective, and it comes down to, the wellness coaching for first responders that I do, and the counseling, education that I'm pursuing and studying, from my perspective and my firm belief, it's about we actively can choose our own mindsets, and we can choose to alter them should we want to. And again, it is a choice to see things from a different perspective, right? It's an active choice. And like I said, it can be hard for us when, sometimes it gets comfy swimming in a pool of cynicism and negativity and bitching and moaning because, all first responders get around, that firefighter, dinner table, or sit in the mess room or the muster room at a police station. And we can all niggle, we can all bitch and moan. Like, we know that we're all really good at it, let's be honest, right? But to be intentional about trying to see things from a different perspective, if we are looking at something and going, I don't really like that, or that just makes me want to think of either that person or that situation or whatever it is from a really negative light, a pessimistic perspective. We have to be able to look at things differently in order to find the good sometimes. And to find the joy, to find the positive, the optimism, the happiness, whatever it is. And maybe that's why when I mentioned at the top of the hour, I do know the Boulder Crest Foundation uses this woof proverb and analogy a lot through some of the stuff that they do in terms of post-traumatic growth. So perhaps maybe that is why you have to be, and why they use it, why it has to be so intentional about finding the good, finding the happiness, finding the joy, because it does take effort in order to do that sometimes, and so it's a choice, something that you can choose to do. It's us exercising our personal agency and being like, I don't want to be that negative, crusty old prick at work anymore. But that's not going to happen overnight. And like we said, it's purposeful, intentional choices that we can make each and every day, often multiple times a day. So it really depends on whether you want to make that choice, doesn't it? Let's kick on with a little bit of Matchbox 20 at 3 a.m. Thank you, the animals there with "We've got to get out of this place." And so I guess one of the last sort of, things I want to mention in regards to the two wolf theory or proverb or whatever you want to call it, and in regards to which one are you feeding, right? I was actually having this conversation with a active duty firefighter the other day, and I was talking about the fact that, there's a physicality that comes along with being a first responder and in particular a firefighter. And, I was joking with him about the fact that, occasionally my husband might have to bring his all of his gear home if he's working out of another firehouse or whatever, and he brings his helmet. And I'm like, I can't even wear his helmet. It's so heavy for me, right? And maybe that says something more about me than it does about him. But I look at it like the physicality aspect of being a first responder. We know, we train, we put in the time, the effort, even if it's hard, even if it's challenging. I think we view physical challenges very differently than we do the mental or psychological challenges that we can set for ourselves. And I think sometimes we can kind of maybe be a little bit blasé about it and think that all the mental health and wellness stuff that I jump on here and bang on about, for a few hours each week. Some people think it's soft, or some people think it's bullshit, or some people think it's easy, right? And what I'm here to tell you is, in particular, about exactly what this proverb I think gets to the root of is it's a choice, but it's intentional and it's purposeful and it's effort. Choosing to feed the good wolf over the bad wolf is effort. Choosing to train your body in the gym at your workplace, or before your shift or after your shift, or whatever it is, right? we don't kind of question, because I guess maybe we see the results. You know, your muscles get bigger, you might drop some kgs or pounds, whatever you want to call it. I think sometimes when it comes to our physicality, I think it's easier to see the results, whereas it's not always something that we can notice really easily when we do make those sort of choices when it comes to our perspective and our mindset and our relationships and, you know, feeding the good wolf, like leaning into the optimism and the joy and the happiness and all that kind of thing, like, because it's maybe perhaps not tangible and we can't like grip it, we can't see it. Sometimes I think that, you know, we don't necessarily pay attention to it in the way that it deserves, but equally I would challenge that slightly, because I would go, okay, like fair enough, right? It's not tangible. It's not something that you can put your hands on and be like, oh yeah, like, you know, check out my abs, check out my arms, whatever. But what are your relationships like when you start looking for the good in people? Or, you know, how is your demeanor amongst your crew at work? What's the morale like when we start making these active choices to feed that good wolf? Because just as much as pessimism and cynicism can and resentment can fester and poison everyone around us, so can the influence of being a little more positive, being a little more, you know, optimistic, letting shit, you know, roll off a duck's back and going, oh, well, you know, yep, okay, that sucked, but hey, we got the rest of the day. Let's crack on. Let's do whatever. You know, I think just because something isn't as tangible as what it comes down to when it comes, you know, perhaps like our physicality, it doesn't mean that it's not making a difference. But again, you have to make that choice to take a step back and actually search for the differences. But I do honestly believe that when you make those intentional and purposeful decisions and choices to feed the good wolf, I do think you'll be able to feel it. I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you, Nate Smith there with World on Fire. And you are back holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And guys, equally, like I said in the last hour, am I super excited to be, you know, recording and releasing some new episodes of my own podcast, I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a first responder mental health podcast, in the next few weeks. Equally, I like to share great resources on here with you, whether it's a first responder related book, a podcast, a show, anything like that. And if you tuned in a couple of weeks ago, you will know that I spoke about a lovely guy by the name of Rich Creamer. So he is a Navy veteran. He is a former police officer. He has been sort of, you know, behind the scenes for pretty much like the last decade when it comes to the mental health and wellness of the first responder population. But equally, he's kind of a different sort of person, in the way that him and I vibe together in a very particular way, because he's no nonsense and he's no bullshit. And that's my kind of person. And so I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago that he has just started a brand new first responder podcast called the Responder Reset Podcast. And so there's another brand new episode dropping tomorrow, so Friday. So check it out wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow it on the socials. This episode is about complacency. And I'm looking forward to listening to it. You can get it, you know, all of the platforms. Follow either the Responder Reset Podcast or Rich Creamer himself. And yeah, I hope you get some value out of it, because he's not one to pull any punches, and he's kind of telling everyone how it is. And I appreciate that about him. So I hope you will tune in and always feel free to share your thoughts. That was a little bit of Imagine Dragons there with Radioactive. And guys, that is going to do it here for me. You've been holding space with Erin Jane for the last couple of hours right here on the Thin Line Rock Station. So I hope you have gotten some value out of what I've shared with you today about the two wolves, proverb, and maybe you can take some time over the weekend to contemplate which wolf am I feeding and is it the one that I want to be? All right. I want you guys to stay safe out there, and you can catch me again next week every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, 2 till 4 p.m. It has been a privilege and a pleasure, as always, getting to spend this time with you. And I'm going to leave you with some Chainsmokers and Halsey. Cheers, guys.
Hi, guys. It's Erin Jane here. Firstly, thank you for listening to I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. This podcast really is for you, the listener. And I hope you're finding as much value in listening to these conversations as I am in having them. If you'd like to offer any feedback, suggest a subject matter, are interested in being a podcast guest, or would like to get in contact to receive first responder life and wellness coaching services, please reach out. You can find me on Instagram at Erin Jane Coaching, or the dedicated podcast account, ErinJane_Darkness Podcast, or my website, www.erinjanecoaching.com. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'm so grateful to have you as part of this darkness community. Cheers.